This is the Fatty Joe Show, coming to you from Casa de Carrie, deep in the forests of Nutmeggerville. This show is dedicated to exploring pathways to better health from a holistic perspective. In each episode, we will explore such topics as nutrition, mental and emotional health, fitness, and more. I'm Yogi, your host, and I became interested in studying health after conventional health dogma became damaging and led me to become massively overweight. Against modern convention, I went on a keto lifestyle and I lost over 300 pounds and gained a level of control on my personal health that I never had before. Now I'm on a journey to find out what is myth and what is truth in the ever-convoluted world of what is considered healthy. Come join me on a journey of discovery as I look for a path to improve total health. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/carriebrown. If you want to check out all of our social media links and recipes, head to carriebrown.com. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fatty Joe Show. Today we have an awesome guest whose resume, like everybody else's, is so much deeper than mine. Just a trucker getting off the truck and losing a bunch of weight. But we have Hanna Boëthius, and she is a type 1 diabetes specialist because it's something that she's dealt with in her own personal life. And she's teaching other people how to eat a healthy lifestyle to help manage their type 1 without using the insulin as much as they would think they would have to use. She runs a diabetic nutrition program. She also puts on one of the largest healthy whole food conferences in Europe, which is pretty awesome. So I want to go ahead and bring her in and have her do the better introduction of herself than I can. So, hi, Hanna, how are you doing?
Hi, Yogi. Thank you so much for having me. That's an awesome introduction. I can just go home now. I'm done.
Yeah. No. We don't need you to go home. We're not done with our coffee yet.
True.
There we go.
I am Hanna Boëthius, as you said, and I am a type 1 diabetic, and I've been so for 35 years. So I've done everything wrong as you can as a diabetic, especially as a type 1 diabetic, because that has a few more nooks and crannies to it sometimes than type 2 perhaps. And yeah, for 26 years, I did everything wrong. I listened to my medical so-called professionals. And I'm sure, as we all know, they maybe don't know everything about nutrition because they don't actually get educated in it too much. So I followed the books, and I was in really big trouble, to be honest, until about 8 years ago now, when I started finding the joys of low carb, or eating lower carb at least, because then I went from sort of a sad standard American, which is standard European, everything standard diet, to a more like liberal paleo approach, where I still had fruits and all of that stuff, and honey and agave and all of that stuff, which is okay, it's cool. But I saw the results straight away in my blood sugars, and I'm like, oh darn, like this is really amazing. That was my first feeling. The second feeling was, what the hell have I been doing for 26 years?
Yeah.
And so gradually I saw my health improve, my energy come back, because I was so amazingly exhausted and tired from 26 years of these kind of blood sugars, up and down, because you can eat whatever you want and just take insulin to it, right? That's the great advice that all type 1s get. And also because I was diagnosed in the 1980s, the height of the low-fat era. the basically was the advice that if you have butter, you're going to die straight away. And you should probably have, extra low-fat milk, instead of water to your meal, because that gives you bonus points. And then, have fruit for dessert, because that's even more bonus points. And, on and on it piles. But instead, I'm every dietitian's nightmare, or most dietitian's nightmare, with eating twice a day instead of 6 or 7 times a day as a type 1 diabetic. So yeah, that's a quick introduction. Also, which has nothing to do really with my diabetes, but with my lifestyle change. As you did mention, I do organize the Low Carb Universe, and usually, apart from, COVID year of 2020, usually we meet once a year in beautiful Mallorca, Spain, where we mix things like health and nutrition and joy and movement and all of these wonderful things. Really a holistic sort of health retreat in that way. We all stay in the same place, we all eat together, we all spend a beautiful couple of days together and listen to amazing international health experts, and they get to both have lectures and workshops, so you can really get into those nitty-gritty questions that you really, really love. And yeah, but I have postponed it for 2021 out of obvious reasons.
Yeah. I've been to Mallorca, and it's a shame that you have to miss. Mallorca is beautiful. It's one of my favorite areas of Spain. My favorite area was Tenerife in the Canary Islands, but that's only because I got to see more of it mainly. Yeah. And a little inside my past, I used to do pro wrestling, and we had a pro wrestling tour through Spain. That was like the main area that we worked at, and we were doing shows in all the bullfighting arenas and going out there. So I got to spend a bit of time out there, but fortunately, other than the 1 week that they gave us off out in Tenerife Islands, most of it was just running from place to place to place to do the shows. So, but Mallorca, we were out there, and it is hot, very hot, but it is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Oh man.
No,
I don't do well in heat.
Beautiful. Yeah. Oh yeah.
No. I'm a cold weather guy.
I'm the opposite around. Now that it's started, you start to feel like the first fall breeze in the air, and I'm like, because of my Scandinavian background, I've already had enough of it in my life, so I don't need it anymore. I'm done.
I'm originally from the northern part of the U.S. in Ohio area, and when I grew up, it's not like that anymore because the weather patterns have changed. But it used to be really harsh winters, and we had it was common to be -20, schools shut down, the whole bit. So I got used to that kind of thing. So I'm pretty good in cooler weather. And then spending time when we moved out to California surfing and stuff, I was constantly in cold water all the time on the Pacific. The Pacific can be very cold, and scuba diving and things. So I kind of got used to the cold, but heat, even though I lived in the Philippines for like 2.5 years, I still don't do well with heat. Like it's just, it doesn't, but I do love that tropical area because I love the food. I love the lifestyle. I love when you're trying to do business though with the Spanish, and they are on that Spanish time, and you're like, hey, the thing starts at 10, and then they show up at 1.
Yeah, exactly. It does not start at 10.
Yeah, so you're like, so I must be fun trying to put on a conference with that kind of thing going on. You must tell like everybody if it starts at 10, like, yeah, be here at 5 a.m.
Latest, sharp.
Yeah, yes.
No.
And then they roll in at 10. Hey, how you doing?
No, I gotta say the people that I'm working with, they're very, very professional. I really, really enjoy it. They make my life and my work so much, like such a big joy that I have no problems with that. They're very punctual for being Spanish.
That's good. Yeah, it's just like there's such a relaxed atmosphere out in Spain. Everybody's very well. For the most part, everybody's laid back. When we happened to be out there was years ago when the whole petroleum protesting thing was going on, and so that was fun. But it was a really cool place, very cool culture. But let's go ahead and talk about the diabetes, because one thing I know, working with a lot of people in the trucking industry, working with a lot of people talking to me, they really don't understand the difference between type 1 and type 2. They do kind of understand that type 2 is from eating too much sugar. And then type 1, they don't really understand what type 1 is and what the difference is. And they also don't understand that they are, even though the treatment is similar, it is still very different. And why on type 1 you may actually need to continue insulin injections, even on a healthy diet.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I mean, in the defense of the truckers, there's also a multitude of healthcare professionals who don't know the difference between type 1 and type 2. And even worse, if you ask a healthcare professional about the difference between ketoacidosis and ketosis, they're gone. Anyway, let's keep to the one step at a time and take type 1 versus type 2 first. So type 1 diabetes is when your pesky little immune system has gone into the pancreas, to the insulin secreting cells, and gone like, you guys look a little bit dodgy. I'm going to wipe you out just in case you are a virus. Ergo, it is an autoimmune disease. Your own immune system has attacked that part of your body so that your body can no longer perform this relatively simple task of producing insulin, one may think. Type 2, on the other hand, it can be because of lifestyle choices, but can also be hereditary. More so, or actually to the same extent as type 1, that can also be hereditary, but not to the same extent. Type 2 is when your body is producing insulin and it has no problems with it. It goes at it at full speed. However, your cells have become a little bit deaf. It's like a little bit like having a toddler, when you scream at the toddler and it doesn't listen, and then you scream a little louder, and then it still doesn't listen, and then you scream a little louder. That's what insulin does to get through to the cells. But the cells are like, we're tired of your yapping. We're tired of you arguing with us the whole time, so we're not going to listen. Ergo, the body cannot use the insulin that it is still producing. So that's why type 2 is basically a very advanced form of insulin resistance, whereas type 1 is you don't have an insulin production, or you don't produce enough insulin for your body to be able to use it. And that's why type 1s will always be insulin dependent. Doesn't matter what miracle cure you're trying to employ, whether that is, the old classics that are floating around on social media, like eating cinnamon. Yes, I've eaten a lot of cinnamon. It's one of my favorite spices, so I eat it a lot. Didn't fix it. Okra water, haven't tried that. Seems kind of slimy. Don't want to do it. And all of these, miracle cures, the herbs, the teas, all
berberine.
Of these things. Oh yes, that absolutely cures type 1 like that. Now, even keto and very, very low carb, even carnivore, you will most probably still have to take at least some insulin, although a lot less. When I was on the SAD diet, I like that word, SAD diet, because that's what it was. And I was taking, I haven't changed much in appearance from keto. I basically stayed the same in terms of weight. And I'm not a huge person, and I was on 100 units of insulin a day, which is astronomic amounts of insulin.
Yeah, it is.
For quite a short, quite a, normal-sized person. And now, after 8 years of keto, I'm down to 20 units a day total. So that's, 80% that I've been able to reduce my insulin usage during, from day to day. So that's something also maybe to bear in mind with these exuberant insulin prices that especially you guys in the US are suffering from. We have a completely different system here in Europe, so we don't really have the same issue. But especially that could be something to consider. That less carbs will require less insulin. How much less? That's individual, of course, but at least you're going to be able to reduce it a bit, at least,
I used to work at group homes for at-risk kids way before I started doing truck driving. It was one of the reasons why I started truck driving, because I got burned out. But a lot of our kids actually had diabetes that it was type 1, and it was because of the fact that they had other conditions or medications that actually caused them to have the diabetes. And one of the things that I would see is exactly like you're saying, is they would feed the kids the worst carbs, high sugar stuff, give the kids candy, as long as you cover it with your insulin. And then they would yell at the kids for getting fat.
Yeah. Exactly.
And go, okay, we're going to put you on a green bean casserole diet. Like, yeah, good times. So
Not so
it
much.
really is. It really is. There is a lack of understanding and this was, I mean, we were under guidance of medical professionals, of doctors telling us what we had to do. And this was their advice to
Yeah.
treat our kids. And so it really does illustrate to the fact that what you said about doctors not really understanding how these systems work.
No.
And
No, I mean that you can study it for years, you can read all the books on the planet about it, but unless you live with a condition or a situation, doesn't matter if it's diabetes or not, everyone has something and everyone is going through something. But unless you live with it 24/7, 365, every second of every day in your life, you won't understand it in the same way. And that's just a fact. It's not like a critique. It's not like a get your stuff together sort of call to action. It's just pure fact that if you don't live with it, you're not going to have the same insight, because you don't get these like little insights every day. You're like, oh, if I do that, then I react like this. If you are interested in your own care, of course. I also know that there's a lot of people with diabetes out there who really don't care that much, and they're just happy if the doctor tells them that, yeah, you're doing a good job, an A1C of 7.5 is great goal for you, so let's do it. For me, 7.5, it was a long time ago, and for me right now it would be a catastrophe, because I've just worked so hard and gotten so far away from that, and I've really managed and tried to take my health into my own hands, because I know I can do better than what I get as advice. And that's where I see there's sort of two types of patients in anything, not just diabetes, not just type 1 diabetes, any illness. There are two sets of patients, either the ones that follow sort of doctors, eat 60% carbs, take this medicine and exercise a little while, once in a while, or you have the sort of empowered patient that really like goes far and beyond in terms of research of their own condition and their own individual care, and sort of what would help them alongside the medication. Because there's so much you can do as a chronically ill patient to help, to make your life easier, to make your life more enjoyable on the side of the sort of outside of the doctor's office. Because I see my doctor, well, now it's less and less because I'm much better controlled, but now I see my doctor maybe twice a year, 7 minutes a pop, so that's almost 15 minutes a year. Who manages the condition the other, whatever million minutes that are left of the year? Yeah, this one, me. So
yeah.
I feel like as a responsibility towards myself, in order so that I can reach my goal, which is to live a long, healthy, happy life, hopefully, fingers crossed, as complication-free as possible, then it's up to me to figure these things out. And it's not up to my doctor to say, hey, how is your hydration? Although they should, but I know they don't have time, they don't have the education, they don't have, the insights maybe that you do have as a patient. So it's up to each and every patient to handle their own, they have to become their own best doctors a little bit.
Yeah, it's really important to advocate for yourself and have that voice, especially one of the things that's also lacking in the medical industry, besides learning about diabetes, is the fact that they make blanket rules for everybody, and not everybody responds the same way. There's that thing called biodiversity, and a lot of the blanket rules that they put in place is over diabetes, and not understanding that these different diabetes types and these forms, and now we're considering Alzheimer's and dementia as possibly type 3 diabetes. So now we have 3 categories of diabetes that function differently in the body, but yet they want to put a blanket, just everybody take this med, you'll be okay. And
even so, if you do have the same type of diabetes, even if you were sort of diagnosed within the same hour, it can be completely different to you as an individual. How I react to a certain type of insulin, for example, is completely different from the next person, or how they can use, I don't know, some nutritional supplements that won't work on me, like, because the biodiversity, like you said, it's amazing that it is even allowed to have these, super blanket statements to just be like, okay, well, take this medication, eat 60% carbs with every meal, and oh, maybe you should exercise every once in a while. It's way too superficial. It's way too superficial.
And you do a lot of work. I mean, you've made it your business to work with patients who are dealing with diabetes in different forms, but mainly type 1. When you're addressing people who are looking for that intervention in the first place, do you ever deal with somebody that gives you a pushback when you tell them, hey, you can change your lifestyle? And they're like, oh, wait a minute, just give me the pill. Just give me the do you deal with that a lot?
Yes, a lot. And especially when I was starting out, because I'm sure you know what I'm talking about in terms of, you find something that works for you and you want everyone to know about it. Like everyone and their grandma has to know that this works for you. And this is what, should be universally applied for these people. In the beginning, yes, I think I was a little too evangelical in that way, a little too preachery about it. Like, yes, go low carb, all your problems are solved, which is of course not true, but it felt like that at the time. So I've worked a lot on my communication and in sort of thinking a little bit, being more aware of how I communicate these things. And I don't think that every type 1 should be on low carb. If it doesn't suit them, it doesn't suit them. If they feel worse, if they're not doing well, either mentally or physically or medically on low carb, then don't do it. It's not like that's the danger, of course, that you make it another blanket statement that yes, low carb is great. It can help, absolutely. But, if you're not doing well on it, then skip it. Like, find what works for you. And that's very, very important for me, for every individual to find their own way. There are tools, there are rules of thumb, everything like that, but there can't be a blanket statement anymore. And so I've worked a lot on my communication, and I still do get a lot of pushback, especially on social media. The ones who actually do contact me to work with me, they know what I'm about. They know what they're going to get. They know, that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm walking the walk and talking the talk, sort of thing. And they know already. So there I don't get much pushback. They're like, okay. And also because when a person, especially with type 1 diabetes, is ready to improve their lives, and they've searched high and low, and they've gone to all sorts of specialists and endocrinologists and everything, they are so like on the edge of like, okay, this is my last hope. This is the last chance I have. This has to work for me. And so the people who I've had the absolute pleasure of working with, they've been so motivated because they know, they're like, okay, well, the other stuff that I was told didn't work, so why not give this a try, sort of thing. So they've been super motivated, and then it's been amazing to get to follow a good few people on their journey towards a healthier life. And that, I have to say, is the most sort of rewarding thing about when I still did a lot of one-on-one coaching. Now it's more public speaking, and now it's more sort of workshops and also a lot more patient advocacy work and patient leader work. But that was definitely the most satisfying thing with being a coach.
Yeah, it's seeing people actually make those changes. It really kind of is uplifting, because you do see so many people that we, as human beings, we tend to, as animals, we look for the easy way out, and what looks to be the easy way out. Yeah, and I think this is something that involves our evolution. That lion over there can kill me. If I try to kill it and eat it, may not end well. I'm gonna eat that mushroom. So we look for that easy way out, the biggest bang for the least amount of effort. There are exceptions to the rule, but I think that's why so many people rely on their medication over making a lifestyle change, because a lifestyle change is much more challenging, and it's going to involve a lot more trial and error
And a lot more
than
effort.
just taking either oral or injectable insulin.
And that being said, I mean, for me, I mean, in the beginning I was completely lost, but now actually eating low carb and cutting out those starches and sugars that we anyways know are not really good for you, it's like the easiest thing. Pick a protein, pick a vegetable, you're done. Like it's not rocket science at all. But yeah, I was definitely in that camp of, oh my God, this is going to be so much work and this is going to be so hard. And it was, because I had no one to show me the way. I did completely on my own because I was desperate to get some life energy back, to sort of just feel that amazing joy of life that you don't have when you are medicated up to the sort of earlobes with whatever it may be.
Let's talk about the insulin real quick.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the side effects that go involved with taking exogenous insulin into your body. What are some of the things that happen that really people don't take insulin wouldn't realize and wouldn't understand?
Well, it's taking exogenous insulin is a very double-edged sword, because too much can kill me and too little can kill me too. So it has to be exact. It's like Goldilocks, it has to be exact, just right, in the terms of dosing, in terms of timing, in terms of area injected can also vary, where sort of on the body it soaks up the best or the slowest or the fastest or the, where it's most, efficient. And also because you're playing the role of your pancreas in this case. And so your timing will be invariably off in comparison to your own pancreas. Exogenous insulin will never be as good as your own, the one you would have produced yourself. And you don't have you have, of course, blood sugar meters and blood glucose meters and continuous glucose meters and all this stuff if you have good insurance. And that they help a lot. But for example, a normal blood glucose monitor is allowed to be 20% off. It's allowed to differ at 20%. And in terms of, a blood sugar of 100, that can be either 80 or 120. I would react completely differently if I saw an 80 on the display or a 120. But that's, that's fine, apparently. And also with the continuous glucose monitors, they are great. They're fantastic tools, and I don't think I would want to live without mine anymore. However, there is a 5 to 10 minute delay, so you don't see your actual blood sugars, in real time as they claim. You see sort of what it was 5 minutes ago. Okay, if you eat a low carb, whole food sort of diet, then it's not going to change that quickly. However, you don't have, the tools that your body intrinsically has to check blood sugar, to shoot out the insulin at the right time. It senses sugar. It notices that, for example, if you go out to eat and there's sugar in some sort of sauce or in some sort of any food, and your pancreas will recognize it and actually shoot out the right amount of insulin. I have to guesstimate what they have put in the sauce, how much insulin will I need to cover it, and when and how much and where should I inject it for it to end up all right, which is, Whole Foods really rule.
Yeah. Our kids in the group, when we used to have to take individually, this is before continuous glucose monitors, but we had to have a slide calculator that, we slid how many carbs were over, and then it told us how much insulin, and it was a cheat sheet thing. But whenever we took the kids out to eat, it was like, the people that worked there couldn't tell you how much carbs was in there. They didn't know what, I have 3 tablespoons of cornstarch with, I don't know. It came in a jar. We put it in, and especially with the type of places we were taking the kids, because it's low budget, and we were taking them to low-end restaurants that are mostly likely using food service products, and the cooks have no idea what's in there. So it's got to be very challenging to monitor all this stuff for a type 1 or type 2 diabetic, especially when you're not able to cook your own meals.
Yep, definitely. And I'm sure you know that, I mean, being on the road so much, I'm sure you're facing those kind of challenges a lot more than, I live at home, I work at home, I have my home office, I can do everything at home. I cook my own meals, everything like that. So I do realize and I recognize that it is a lot harder if you can cook your own meals and know exactly what goes in, and you know that it's going to be done in exactly this many minutes. So if your blood sugar is a little bit higher, you can take insulin earlier to already make it go down before you eat. There are all of these little things that you can't control with food that you either order from somewhere or bring along or buy from somewhere and then eat later. It makes it a lot more complicated. That's true.
Yeah, this definitely puts in a lot of hindrances to a person's ability to, more hurdles to life. Now, one of the other side effects of taking endogenous insulin that I've seen a lot is insulin unlocks the fat cells to absorb fat. And I've seen a lot of people, whether in my group home or even like kids that I knew when I was growing up that were type 1 diabetes, had a heck of a time managing their weight because of having to take so much exogenous insulin all the time. And that could be another factor, because then the doctor's yelling at you because you're gained weight, but they're giving you the stuff to gain weight, and you're trying to lose weight. Because I knew very athletic people and they were just, I can't lose the weight.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely one big side effect of having to take these industrial doses of exogenous insulin, which come along with a sad way of eating, and because, as I said before, the more carbs, the more insulin you have to take. That's a simple fact. And that equation it's so hard to manage, because you have this much sugar, you have to cover it with this much insulin. The equilibrium, never really matches up anywhere. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you eat this much carbs and you know that approximately this much insulin covers it, then the equation is a lot easier, and then you have a lot less margin of error. So that is one thing, absolutely. And there's a lot of talk in the diabetic community right now about double diabetes, where people with type 1 also get type 2 because they become so insulin resistant. And then because of the insulin resistance, they have to take even more insulin, and then they have to eventually go on to medicines that are normally for type 2, like metformin or Ozempic or whatever these other the newer injectables are, and it's a vicious circle. It really is. It's not as acute though as the main side effect of all insulin, because it is the only thing that will lower your blood sugar. Really, it is, of course, that your blood sugar goes too low, and you sort of have a hypoglycemia, a low blood sugar that is lower than whatever your personal threshold is, and that can get dangerous very, very quickly. The weight gain and stuff, and not having enough insulin for a couple hours or whatever, that's it. That you can still turn around, but a low blood sugar can get really acute really fast, and you need to know what you need to do in those situations, because otherwise it can come to a quick exit for a person with diabetes.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how gnarly that low blood sugar can actually be on a person's body. And I've also seen I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I've done a lot of things. Most of my life, I actually worked 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. And so I have a fairly varied background, but one of the things that we happened at one of the places I worked at is we had a person that was type 1 diabetic, and their blood sugar dropped severely, and they appeared to be drunk. Yep. And they were arrested by the police, who did not test. And nobody knew. Everybody thought he was drunk. Nobody knew he was type 1 diabetic. So that seems to be another risk of a diabetic, is the public perception of what's going
Oh
on in
yeah.
your body.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's one thing. And as I said, it can get really acute really fast, and that's why it's so important to, for example, be very open. I know, and I tried to keep my own type 1 diabetes very behind shut doors for very long, but I realized they would come back and bite me somewhere painful. So, communicate about the fact that you do have diabetes. It's nothing, technically it's nothing to be ashamed of. You haven't, even if, it is lifestyle related, you didn't choose to become diabetic. It's not your choice at all. And so really open and honest communication of, yes, I have this. When this happens, I need you to do this, or, in case of emergency, call this person, or this is my doctor, or if you find me, just go through the whole, like, if you find me out of it somewhere, in the office or, somewhere else, just call 911 and tell them I'm type 1 diabetic. They will know what to do. And there is, unfortunately, a lot of stigma also for type 1 diabetics, because there's so many so many myths out there that that type 1 would also be related to sugar consumption, or the fact that you had gluten, or because as it is an autoimmune, gluten can trigger a lot of fancy little things, or stuff like that. And I'm always asking myself, because I was diagnosed when I was 2, I'm always asking myself, how much gluten and sugar would I have had time to actually eat? If that were true, how much did I have time to shove in my mouth by the age of 2? Like, come on, that's not fair. That's not anything. So there is a lot of stigma around both or all types of diabetes, and these probably not willing to harm jokes about, this donut's gonna give me the diabetes. I'm like, super funny, but
Yeah.
Could you just at least try not to put down this many of the world's population, because diabetes is not a small thing, and it won't get any smaller anytime soon because of the way we are currently thinking about nutrition, I think, and other things, but mainly nutrition.
Well, this kind of goes along with a problem that we have generally in a lot of our societies, and not just where I live, but I've seen this globally. I've had the opportunity to travel to not as many places as you have, but I've had the opportunity.
I don't know, not so sure about that. Yeah.
Well, I've only seen a few places in Europe. I have to say, most people in Europe have been to more countries than I am just by driving down the block. But the places that I have been, I have seen quite regularly that there's a lot of victim blaming going on for people in a number of fields. And we generally consider victim blaming for things like sexual assault or domestic violence, but there's victim blamings for personal conditions and diseases that, through no fault of the person's own, they've gotten. We are kind of seeing this in our current society of COVID, where we have people who are not wanting to wear a mask here in I don't know if this is happening in other countries, but here in the US, not wanting to wear a mask. And they're telling people, well, if you have a weakened immune system, it's your problem. You should have eaten healthy.
Yeah.
And they're not taking into account that may have happened to this person to have a weakened immune system may have nothing to do with diet or lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, in the beginning here, I mean, it's still like that, but I've sort of given up hope that it's going to change. But, people with diabetes and old people just bunched together in one group.
Right.
And we should just stay home and quarantine ourselves. And I'm like, yes, okay, that's a wonderful idea. But I think there's a lot of differentiation lacking in terms of, for example, COVID. Yeah, it's just you and the old people, and oh, it's only seriously ill people who die from COVID. I'm like, hello? How can you stand there saying that to my face when I'm risk group? I live very close to people who are risk group as well, more so than I am. And yes, there are nuances in terms of how well controlled your diabetes is. They assume, of course, we don't know because this virus is still so new. So we don't really know anything about it yet.
Right.
But it's always, and I really, really try to be a positive person and not be like, me, Mickey Mouse Club.
Right.
Just because someone says something stupid to me. But, sometimes it's just like, come on, people, that's really hurtful.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, especially, I think it's a byproduct of our hustle and bustle society. Just a second, let me move this camera. Things are getting glary behind me here. All right. So I think it's a byproduct of the hustle and bustle of modern society, of things becoming so expensive. So people focus so much into work, and then their world becomes, I got to get to work. I got to get to this. I got to do that. Now I need a new iPhone. I need this. And they get so me focused and I focused. They're not taking into consideration or lacking the empathy of what is happening with other people, including somebody who may have type 1 diabetes, and not just type 1 diabetes, but there's a number of autoimmune issues that affect. I mean, if you look at some of the severe food allergies that we're seeing, these are not kids that chose to be allergic to peanuts. They were born this way, and yes, maybe their parents made decisions that affected the epigenetic lines, but that child didn't make that decision. And so if you're going to, give a kid or have peanuts around a kid who's severely allergic to them, it's severely lacking of your personal responsibility and empathy toward what may be happening to somebody in your community. And it seems to be that way for type 1 and type 2 diabetics, as well as and people who are overweight. I received a little bit of this myself when I was struggling with my weight, and I was eating what I was told to be healthy, and I made it to over 600 pounds. And I was eating tons of vegetables. Vegetables supposed to make me skinny. And it didn't work. And it got to a point where you'd be, for an overweight person, you'd be actually ashamed to eat. And my friend who is diabetic, she was ashamed because she had to take injections in her stomach and her butt sometimes, and she was so ashamed of the fact that when she would go out, she couldn't eat or drink a lot of the things that people were doing. And she would sometimes succumb to the peer pressure and then have problems later, but be afraid to tell people. She could feel something happening, but she was afraid to say it because of that victim blaming aspect.
Yeah, no, I've been through exactly that. And especially when I was a teenager, for example, a lot of peer pressure, and also the innate wish of wanting to be exactly like everyone else. Now I celebrate that I'm not, but back then, when you are a teenager, you don't want anything else but be exactly like everyone else and exactly like your friends. And there, the mismanagement I did to myself then, I'm not sure I've still forgiven myself for all the harm that I caused myself in those years, just because I was ashamed, because I was afraid of talking about it, because it was a nuisance, because I didn't want to handle it, because I didn't want to acknowledge it, really. So I tried to ignore it, but of course that came back to bite me. So it's not worth it, people. Don't ignore it. Just deal with it instead, and you're going to be a lot better off.
Another thing too that goes along with that public perception, and I've seen it targeted toward overweight people as well as diabetic people, is why don't you just go work out more? Yeah. You'll be better if you work out more. And they don't understand that, one, a diabetic person's metabolism functions differently, and they may not have the energy to go work out at that moment in time or as consistently as other people, as well as a lot of the people I know have struggled with diabetes often suffered from joint pain and random body pains that you never hear that talked about.
Yeah. And that's very true. And especially, that exhaustion really comes from these blood sugars when it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And on a day, it can be between 40 and 400. And no one in the medical community really bats an eyelash, because that's diabetes, that's how it progresses, this is what happens. But maybe if we would take a step back and look more holistically on something like diabetes, what key role does nutrition play? How can we move so that it is beneficial and it's not too straining, but it's still challenging enough? And what can we do with our mental health? Something like mental health has never been discussed with me in 35 years of living with this, a very, very chronic condition that I don't see will be cured in my lifetime, but that's because I'm a bit of a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
Or realist, depending on which one you're aiming for.
Right.
But it's just, there's so much more we can do for people with diabetes that is just not done, because I don't know, it takes too much time, or no one has made compelling enough arguments, or it's something like that. And it's really upsetting to me to see how many people who live with diabetes as their constant companion every day of their goddamn lives, and they don't get the help that they need, and they don't have the insight, and they don't get the chance to review their lifestyle from a holistic point of view.
Now, you have clients come to you or come to your organization. What is the steps that you take your clients through to help address these issues and help get them on the right path? What are the things that you do to help folks in this population?
Well, I have, throughout these years, I've concocted sort of a whole system of lifestyle changes that one that may be beneficial for you if you live with diabetes to have a little closer of a look at. And I always go, when a one-on-one client comes to me, I always go out from their goal. They have to set their own goal, because if I set a goal for them, it's not going to be motivating. They're not going to try to achieve it. They're not going to, it's not going to be motivating in the long term unless they've figured it out for themselves in the beginning. And then we go from there. Sometimes it doesn't even have to do with blood sugar management. Sometimes it's, how can my mindset be better about diabetes? Okay, let's work a lot of mindset. How do you see yourself here? How do you see yourself there? What can you do in certain situations? How can you start to react differently to, bad blood sugar reading, or not bad, but less than ideal blood sugar reading, or, when an injection really hurts, like how, instead of jumping and swearing, how can you handle that better, for example? And then other times it is absolutely better blood sugar management. I need my A1C to be this or that, according to my doctor, because I want to get pregnant, which is, something really important, that your blood sugar management is really well controlled, so that both the baby and you can go through pregnancy safely, healthily, and come out on the other side with all limbs intact, sort of thing. And then we work on nutrition, and then sometimes it's like, but I have the nutrition and I have the mindset, what else can I do? And then we go into things like movement, for example, and finding things that motivate that exact person. Not everyone is a marathon runner, thank God, because marathon running is really boring. And not everyone enjoys going to the gym. Not everyone enjoys yoga, but there is always something that you can sort of take and remodel for an individual. And there's always something that you can do in order to improve your situation in terms of health, in terms of diabetes management, in terms of self-love, and how important self-love is, for example, in living with a chronic condition, because that is crucial. If you don't love yourself, then how are you gonna manage something that is a part of you through hate? That doesn't work. You have to do it from a place of love and be like, okay, this time, maybe, because we all have bad days, no matter if you're keto or not, you still have the occasional bad day, and beating yourself down about that, and being, your own worst enemy at that point, it's not constructive. It's not going to get you to the end goal. You have to be like, okay, you know what? Today wasn't great. Cry it out and go to bed early and then start over the next day. But, you have to have that sort of, is that individuality, again, that maybe, which is why I say on my website, that I think of things that your healthcare team hasn't even thought of yet, because it's true. They haven't thought of things like, finding a motivating way to move your body. They haven't thought of, oh, maybe caffeine is not great for your blood sugars, or stuff like that. Maybe that stresses your body more. How do you handle stress? Just a simple question like that, because stress is the #1 blood sugar killer. So it's a good idea to keep that under wraps.
Yeah, and I definitely seen that, especially when times that people I know have been stressed out, including myself. If you're trying to lose body fat, it's not really a good time to go. It's not, even if you're trying to fast, like trying to fast while you're stressed out. It's just,
forget it.
yeah. So when you're working with these people, do you ever work? I don't know if things are changing out in Europe. There are some doctors out here that have decided to partner with the health coaches and work together to get a person a better outcome than just drug intervention.
Yeah.
Is that happening out in Europe at all? Are you finding more physicians that are open to working with you in a lifestyle change rather than just masking things with medication?
I'm still personally looking. I'm still, I still haven't found a doctor who's willing to do that here. However, I do know other people who work similarly to me who are working very closely with physicians, and they really get referrals and everything. And I'm like, well, that is easy.
Yeah.
But I think also that the US, you guys in the US are a little bit, I mean, we have a lot of, especially in Switzerland where I live, there's a lot of alternative medicine, and, homeopathy is a big thing, and acupuncture and all this stuff, and it's covered by health insurance. However, on the more sort of holistic, integrative medicine part, you guys are a lot further along, I would say, than in Europe. There are small little cells in Europe of, these holistic medicine people, but you guys are a lot further.
Wow. As much as you hear the podcast in the United States bashing the medical system, it's nice to know that we're doing right somewhere.
You're doing one thing, right?
Yeah, we got one. So I just recently had a few doctors on the show, and we were talking about issues in the medical, both perceived issues by the public that may not be true. And so we've done 3 episodes of bashing the medical system in a lot of ways. So it's good to have some positive impact in there. So some positive feedback.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard not to bash at this point of time.
Yeah, it is.
It's not, I don't see that the medical community at large, regardless of geographic location, but I feel like it's a little bit left behind when it comes to, some sort of revolution, or, and just look at something like medical research, for example. Only very, very recently did they actually start involving patients in the research.
Or women.
Yeah, or women for that matter.
All the research was done on men, and they were trying to treat women as if they physiologically worked the same way.
Like we're mini men.
Yeah. And so, well, I don't know about mini, because I've met some women that
some sizable ladies, yes.
Yeah.
Oh no,
Pro wrestling world.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, we had a lady from Germany that used to military press me, and I weighed over 300 pounds at the time, and she was a big girl.
Yeah.
So
no matter body size, that whole thing aside, but I mean, just the fact that our hormones work completely differently. Yeah. And the fact that we have so much going on in our bodies at all times, and things like, for example, statins, they haven't been actually done any research in women, and also the findings that they're doing in men is less than is less than what they expected, I think. But yeah, it's just a very interesting, if not to say sad, phenomenon that women are just treated as smaller, well, sometimes smaller versions of men, because we're not. It's a completely different biology in that way.
It's kind of funny. When they excluded women from research, they thought they were ethically and morally doing the right thing because they believed it was amoral to test things out on women and do research on women that may affect. So they thought they were doing a good thing, and I think that's the carryover for a lot of what we're seeing with the issues of medical treatment and the healthcare system is they're perceived that they're doing a good thing, even though there's a lot of evidence saying that that what you're doing is wrong. But we also have to take in consideration, it also took decades for doctors to get into the habit of washing their hands between patients. And when initially, and I forgot the doctor's name, but when he was telling people, you got to wash your hands, you're spreading diseases, they attacked that doctor so bad, he ended up in an insane asylum. So I think the citizen science movement, the research aspect, we're seeing more medical researchers that are changing their opinion about things. But it takes a long time for that to matriculate down to the actual practitioners.
Absolutely.
And we are seeing it from some practitioners who are, every practitioner I've seen that has gone, yeah, okay, keto is a good thing and we're going to adopt it for ourselves. Every single one of them has done so, has stated that they have done so because they saw the results in their patients. When their patients went against medical advice and decided to go, and they're like, well, after the 50th patient, there might be something here,
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that blows my mind, that not every doctor, in my case, I have a lot to do with endocrinologists, of course, because of the diabetes, but not every endocrinologist has this like question of like, what did you do? Like that curiosity. I'm lacking that curiosity from a lot of the medical community. They're like, oh, but so if you're not following my advice and you have these results as you do, what are you doing? Please teach me so I can tell other people about it. It's like, no. Instead, I'm labeled as a fluke in the system and sort of, whatever works for you, I guess that's great, but that's just you.
You're part of the French paradox, right?
Well,
Instead of figuring out what's going on, we're just going to call it a paradox and move on.
Yeah, but just like, how can you, if you are in the medical profession, how can you not be curious? If someone comes into your clinic and be like, you know what, I lowered my A1C from double digits to 4.9. Do you want to know how I did it? Nah, not really.
I think there's a twofold reason for this. And there's one that's kind of a more insidious reason. And well, both of them are a little insidious, but one is not so much the doctor's fault, whereas one is the doctor's fault. And one of the reasons is ego. I've been told all this stuff. I'm the doctor. I'm the one with the long coat. You can't tell me what is going on because I know more than you.
Yeah.
And so they close off listening.
Yeah.
But the other side that's not necessarily the doctor's fault is, in order to make the hospital money, they have to see all these different patients. And in order to be curious and to look at something in a way to learn from it, you need time.
Yeah.
If you don't have time, it's hard to be curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're constantly. So I think those are the two factors that kind of come into play with that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why we're starting to see, and this is, a little guesstimation, but I think we're starting to see the need for a true revolution in terms of how we handle medicine. So that it's not this top down, I'm the doctor, you're the patient, ergo you have no idea what you're talking about and I know everything, because that's not true anymore. And also to make the patient the middle, sort of put the patient in the middle of medicine, instead of saying, well, you have type 1 diabetes, you should take this and this and this, and you should do this and that. And also, oh yeah, I see here that yes, this lab value is a little bit high. There's a pill for that. There you go. Enjoy. You just sent on your way. Instead, actually getting into, okay, your lifestyle, what are you doing, how are you handling things, what are you using in these situations, just things like that. We have to make time for each other, because otherwise it's gonna explode somewhere.
Yeah, we are generally people of extremes, and it kind of takes jumping from one extreme to another to eventually kind of swing that pendulum to settle down to where it needs to be. So we see that across the board when it comes to everything from healthcare to religion to politics to all these different aspects that we deal with on a daily basis. And also the extremes tend to get more airtime in people's TVs and in their heads. They focus more on the extreme things than they do the
just watching the political debate in the US right now as an outsider is it's popcorn time.
I really try to stay away from politics because honestly it's distracting in this, but I'll have to say that, and it's nothing new. I study history. Nothing what we see now is new. It's only new to us.
Yeah, true.
But the lack of civility that goes along with politics in general, and the pointing fingers when both sides actually have a hand in the problem, and yet somehow the one you like is not the problem. It's just kind of a, I don't know. I sit back and I'm just like, I don't understand. I don't, I'm out the gate and I have to turn it off. Yeah.
But
so
no, but I see sort of similar things in within medicine, and especially in the care of chronically ill patients. It's sort of, as long as you don't, find the extremes and the polarities, yes, that's one thing, but as long as you don't agree with what the establishment thinks, then you are basically a cuckoo,
Well, there's an aspect too of modern medicine is very much like modern politics.
It is.
It is very much a political system. And to get higher positions in administration, you need, much like a politician needs support from lobbyists, the administrators seek support from pharmaceutical representation and from other areas to fund research and things. And it does taint the outlook and the I'm not saying this right now, but it does taint the intention of what is supposed to be happening, because of the interests that are not necessarily aligned with the patient's interest.
Exactly. And that's really my point there too, that a lot of what happens in medicine and the medical community now is so far beyond, to a certain extent, the patient has completely been taken out of the picture. Although that is who the medicine should benefit, not, administration and doctors and kickbacks on prescriptions or whatever it is that they get. But it should be really valued in terms of, oh, we helped increase this patient's, life. Just helping people to get better, get healthier. That should be the value, and not the amount of minutes you sit in the doctor's office when they talk about the recent holiday to somewhere or another, just to make small talk. Really not pay for the minutes, but really pay for the results, which I would be more than willing to do, rather than listen to some of the small talk that I have in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I agree.
And pay for it.
Yeah. So I have 5 questions I like to ask my guests coming, and they tend to be, I was supposed to design these as like short answer questions, but they tend to not be that short after a while. Yeah. So but it is to help. One, it's so that listeners can see where there's consensus, where there's not. It's to give people avenues to look into. So my first question is always, who are your top 5 health heroes?
Oh my Lord. That is a good question. I think number one is definitely all these patients with different chronic conditions who decide to take their health into their own hands. They are superheroes to me because it takes a lot of guts to tell the medical community, basically, you're wrong, it doesn't work for me. This is not the way I want to live or progress with my life. I want to do something different. I want to have a long, happy, healthy life, all of this stuff. I think that is, I would say those are my top 5.
The patients.
The patients
All right.
themselves. And also the doctors within the, or the people within the medical community who are waking up now to see that, yes, there's a huge impact in terms of what we're eating. And no one mentioned, no one forgotten sort of thing, but all these doctors that are willing to speak out, who are willing to take all the slack that they get on social media, for example, for thinking, for presenting their views. And even if they are super extreme, it doesn't matter because it may just help someone out there. So they're actually doing a much better job than the keyboard heroes who are sending them some nasty messages and stuff. So yeah, I would say yes, those two for sure. Yeah, no, there's a lot of very, very inspiring people out there, and I'm happy to be part of this fantastic health-driven community, which hasn't been like that for a long time.
Yeah, it's, we seem to be reverting back to, with some of the modern knowledge that we have in research, we seem to be kind of getting an understanding of the good things about older versions of medicine and trying to incorporate those good things along with the modern technologies and things to find that happy medium. And it seems to be driven by patients as well as the citizen scientists, especially those citizen scientists that are coming from engineering backgrounds.
Yes.
They are conditioned to look at systems and how all systems work together. So instead of a lot of doctors who are focused on being a specialist in one area, they're looking at entire systems and how these systems work together and how one thing can affect all these different things. So I think that's where a lot of this new approaches are being driven by.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. It's very, very inspiring to see people looking at taking medicine and taking modern medicine and the latest findings and just completely sort of turning them around from an engineering perspective and finding the patterns and seeing how it sort of correlates with the other parts and all this stuff. And that is fantastic. I'm so happy to see that emerging more and more.
We have one coming on my next interview, which is Ivor Cummings.
Fantastic. So, he's a great guy.
Yeah, today's Europe Day. So
awesome. On Labor Day.
So my next question is, what are the top 3 either specific foods or types of foods that you think everybody should include in their diet?
Ooh, I think in the beginning, if you are going towards a more whole food way of life, which, can be overwhelming because I've also been very much using pasta and rice and, all these grains and stuff as very much a crutch because it was simple. And I'm like, before I used to think, okay, I have pasta tonight. What do I have to the pasta? And now I think completely the other way around. Tonight I'm having bolognese sauce or, carbonara sauce. What do I have to that? What vegetables am I going to pick to the sauce rather than, going out from the carb perspective? So changing that perspective. But I really think that 3 things that everyone should have in their diet. I think electrolytes is a huge thing that aren't maybe acknowledged as much. So make sure to have, the potassium and the magnesium and all of this stuff. Also, hand in hand with that comes real pure salt. I think that's fantastic, and that's been proven by many people and many studies to actually be beneficial for health and not, driving high blood pressure and stuff. So salt and electrolytes, that is definitely one. And then I think it is very much up to the individual. I personally believe that animal products and animal nutrition from animal sources is very, very beneficial for a healthy human being. That can be discussed, I know, any which way till Thursday. But for me personally, I really believe in animal foods. So be that, all kinds and as much nose to tail as you can handle. But if you can't do that, then maybe at least incorporate an egg every once in a while, because that is like a nutritional powerhouse. And third one, lots and lots of clean, healthy, filtered if it has to be, but water. To hydrate all the little cells and all the little functions of your body, and everything will work a lot better when you are properly hydrated. So those are my three.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of my electrolytes and my hydration. So
yeah, me too. I'm sipping water all through. So
yeah. So my next question is the opposite. Are there or what 3 foods do you think people should absolutely avoid?
I think factory processed sugary foods is not good for anyone, diabetes or not. I don't think it is very nutritionally, loose that way in opposition to nutritionally dense. There's no nutrients really in that, and I really believe a lot in eating as much nutrients as you can. And that's why I'm also maybe not a huge fan of things like bulletproof coffee, because you're just drinking your, fat instead of actually sitting down, chewing it, eating it, because you wouldn't even last. You wouldn't even last eating that much fat in like a whole sitting with like a spoon. So yes, processed sugar and stuff. Oh, vegetable oils. I don't, and especially in the States, I cannot even tell you when I go over to the States and, really excited because we go out to restaurants and it's really nice and everything. And then I'm like, I start feeling like inflamed and my joints are a little bit, inflamed and stuff. I'm like, but I only ate, what I normally do. Well, I didn't think of the fact that it's probably, fried in something really vlacky that I don't even want to pronounce, Right. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah. I was exposed to a lot of vegetable oils recently while I was on the road, because there was times where I couldn't cook for myself, and I noticed that a lot of my inflammation went down and my fat loss kicked back up when I got off the truck, when I was away from them. So my next question is, if there was one nutritional myth that you or health myth that you could just get rid of overnight, make it go away, what would that be?
That would be to actually, for especially healthcare providers, but also everyone else, to understand the difference between ketoacidosis, diabetic ketoacidosis, and ketosis. They're two completely different things. Yes, they both involve ketones. It's true. However, nutritional ketosis is a completely natural state for the body, where it burns fat instead of sugar, which is actually a good thing. Whereas the other one, diabetic ketoacidosis, is actually a life-threatening, very, very serious condition that you have to go to the ER for. And that does not happen automatically with type 1. If we want to have sort of this is the myth, and then sort of a little side myth.
Yeah.
That even if you are in ketosis as a type 1, you don't automatically go into DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. It requires a lack of insulin or relative lack of insulin. You need to be dehydrated. And so as long as you take the insulin that you need for your body, no matter how much it is, because that's also a conversation in the diabetic community, no matter how much your body needs, you take the insulin for it, and you keep an eagle eye on your blood sugars, either through a CGM or frequent finger pricks, and you keep hydrated. It's not harder than that. That's how I avoided ketoacidosis for the past 7 or so years, which is, amazing, because before, when I was eating a lot of carbs, I was in and out of the hospital quite a lot with DKA, and it wasn't pleasant anywhere. So I don't recommend anyone trying it. And yeah, so that would be my one myth.
Awesome. And it kind of along those lines, if there's something about the medical field that you could change overnight, what would it be?
I think I've already answered it, actually, in terms of this, to awaken a bit of curiosity within the medical field, and a little bit, even if you think it's a fluke in the system, even if you think that this shouldn't be sustainable, ask. Be interested in your patient's journey towards better health, what they've found out, yes, you know a lot as a doctor or as a medical professional, but you can't know everything. No one knows everything. So a little more interest in the patient themselves, please.
Awesome.
With a cherry on top.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, I know you have your own podcast.
Well, I did. Well, a little bit on a hiatus right now, but I did.
Okay. So if people want to reach you, they want to work with you, they want to have you as a speaker, how do they get to the contacts?
You can go to my website, which is hannaboethius.com. I'm sure you can put it in the show notes somewhere because it's not the easiest to spell last names. Or follow me on social media, and I am active pretty much everywhere under Hanna Diabetes Expert. You can contact me there, and we'll get something cooking for you too.
Awesome. So I definitely recommend that you, especially if you or somebody that you care about is dealing with some form of diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, I strongly suggest you at least go to Hanna's website, because there's a ton of information there. But I also ask that if you are looking for an alternative way, that you get in contact with Hanna and see if you can't get into a situation where you can work with her and get into a better lifestyle for yourself that isn't so governed by having to take your next dosage of medicine. Mm-hmm. All right, everybody, this has been this episode of the Fatty Joe Show. I gotta take off, and I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to have you on again sometime. Maybe when next year, if everything calms down and you're talking about the conference, come on in and talk about it. But hopefully before then too, we could probably find all kinds of topics to talk about.
Well, clearly. Thank you so much for having me on. Give my love to Carrie, and have a fantastic day.
All right, Hanna. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Fatty Joe Show. Be sure to leave a comment and subscribe. It helps the show reach more people. To support the show, as well as Carrie Brown and Yogi's work on the blog, keto recipe development, masterclasses, and to gain access to private Facebook groups and other awards, go to patreon.com/thefattyjoeshow or patreon.com/Carrie Brown. Also, check out our Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker YouTube channel for video versions of the Fatty Joe Show, recipe videos, and more. Join our awesome community on the Facebook group, The Keto Kitchen with Carrie Brown and Yogi Parker, and check out our carriebrown.com website for recipes, blog posts, discounts, cookbooks, masterclasses, and other great stuff. Thank you.